Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. I'm Don Waldrop, State Section Director for MUFON LA. We have a guest speaker tonight of Dr. Chet Snow from Sedona, Arizona, who has studied both ancient prophecies and contemporary seers. Since 1991, he has met with Native American spiritual elders and recorded their stories of the star elders, whose imminent return has long been foretold. Struck by similarities between the crop circles and sacred Hopi petroglyphs, he has devoted each summer since 1992 to research and personal experience these mysterious formations appearing in England for the last 2 decades. So it is my pleasure to welcome one of the foremost crop circle researchers who has really dedicated a great deal of his time in this field. He has also worked with earth changes and relationships with the crop circles and with other paranormal events. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chet Snow.
Hi, Don. Thank you, Don. It's my pleasure and privilege to be with you this evening. And just a couple of things before we get into the actual topic of this evening, which is on crop circles, native prophecies, and more. And there are 2 things. I do have a table in the back. Unfortunately, my wife couldn't be with me tonight because we are going to be at the Star Knowledge Conference that's going on in Sedona this weekend, so I just came in alone. So if you do want to come back after the talk, I will go back there right after the question period. And I have a couple of things. One thing I want everyone to get, and that is the small piece of paper like this, and there should be enough, which is crop circle information, including the website that is, I feel, the best website on the information on the subject, where you can get information both in the United States and in the United Kingdom, the Center for Crop Circle Studies and the Wiltshire Crop Circle Study Group, their addresses and all of that, plus mention of our own tours that we take to England each summer now. The other thing that is back there that I want you all to get if you can is and it's interesting that we chose the same paper as MUFON, quite intuitively, independently, for this evening. And that is on our Earth Mysteries and the Millennium Conference that will be coming up in Sedona at the end of February with Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Zechariah Sitchin, Pleiadian Channel Barbara Marciniak, UFO researcher Linda Bolton Howe, David Hatcher Childress, and others, Neil Freer, etc., etc. So that's something, a good excuse to come to Sedona. By the way, if you are interested in the Star Knowledge Conference, you can look it up on the web at www.starknowledge.com. And it has all the program and everything. That is this weekend in Sedona. So, having put all that forward, I wanted to talk to you on a couple of different things tonight. How many have read my book, Mass Streams of the Future? Is there anyone? People? Yes, okay, a few of you have. So I'm not talking entirely to people who've never heard of it, but many of you have not. It's been out for a while. It is the result of research that was done in the decade of the 1980s, and thankfully some of the conclusions or some of the visions, some of the dreams, as they might have been called, that came forward in that time are now being changed. And I think it's a really good thing, because otherwise, quite frankly, we would probably all be underwater, according to the view that was first put forward in that book. As of 1998, much of Southern California was due to go underwater and was foreseen as going underwater. And as we all know, at least I haven't grown gills yet, and neither have you, so we're still here on dry land. And for that, I think it's a wonderful thing. And it shows me that how I see the changes coming and the earth changes that we are living in, and the role of prophecy in understanding these changes and the perhaps even greater changes yet to come is very important. That I see prophecy as showing us forward the highest set of probabilities that are actual and real at the time that the prophetic wisdom is coming through, that people are receiving this information. Our method was more scientific than prophetic, but it also included some of both. And nonetheless, as the information comes through, it immediately begins to change those probabilities, because hopefully people do read the message, hopefully people do hear some of what the prophecy is saying, and if it is a prophecy about a coming event of a negative nature, as often prophecies are, it provides an opportunity, a window you might say, to begin to change and alter that future in a more positive way. And I do hope and do feel that some of the things that have happened since the publication of Mass Dreams of the Future, and this book is certainly not alone, but others and other people working in similar fields since that time have begun to make some of those changes. And so I see some of the predictions and some of the trends that are set forward in Mass Dreams as very actual and very much coming true. However, the most high-level disasters, or the most dramatic changes, you might say, have not happened. And as we may be going still into some of the same trends, it seems to me that there is a definite decrease in the intensity of the events, and possibly also in what certainly shouldn't be seen as the inevitable conclusion of those events. One of the chapters in that book that people find to be very interesting nonetheless, because it's more than just a look at certain visions of the near-term future, has to do with how the whole area of physics and the quantum mechanics and our new discoveries that are even coming out obviously much faster than any book can come out are also altering our perception and our understanding of the future, and are changing the very fabric in some ways of what is happening. Plus, of course, the entire question of the UFO phenomenon. And so there is a chapter also on the UFO phenomenon, which obviously, again, doesn't cover new material particularly, but attempts to give an overview and particularly to understand some of the types of experiences and looked at from both scientific and psychological points of view. My own background is that of a historian and a sociologist. That's where my Ph.D.s come from. And it only was in the mid-1980s when I met Dr. Helen Wambach, a clinical psychologist from Berkeley, California, while I was working for the Air Force out at Travis Air Force Base, that I became interested in what might be called paranormal or other types of investigations. I must say, and just to ward off the question that I often do get asked, yes, I did work for the Air Force for 7 years with fairly high-level clearances, and I did work daily with air crews who were flying transport aircraft all around the world, and either they simply weren't talking about such things, or it didn't come up in our experience, but I never had any discussion of an unidentified flying object sighting during those 7 years. So just so you understand that. My own experiences have been outside of that professional context that I was in at that time. That doesn't mean that they weren't happening or the people weren't having them, but the air crews that I worked with and the missions that I flew did not have any in their particular time as they were taking place. Now, as we look into the whole idea of mass dreams of the future, Dr. Wambach had put forward a very interesting and rather startling at the time hypothesis that rather than depending on anecdotal stories to understand the possibilities of both regression, which means going into the past and exploring what has become commonly called past lives or past life therapy, and also going into the future or progression work, looking into future possibilities and future probabilities or future lives, that you could do this with large groups of people rather anonymously, and the answers that the people or the experiences that the people were having during these sessions, these large group sessions, could be statistically put together, could be tallied up, and to be looked at from a sociological point of view. This was fascinating to me, as you can imagine, having been trained in that discipline, and something that I found in my own work with her, because I originally went to her to understand certain, might call paranormal phenomena that were happening in my own life, to understand that better and then get involved in her research. And so that is exactly what happened. she found that when she took large groups of people, and she worked with people from 50 in a group up to 500 in a group, and ultimately in our own future work, we worked with over 2,000 subjects all across the United States, and I continued the work after her passing on into France, where I have lived before in this lifetime and continue to have an ongoing relationship. My wife is from France, and also the United Kingdom, of seeing what would happen if you took these people into a future experience. What kind of a society, what kind of patterns, what kind of environment might they come up with? Such simple things as what they would find on their dinner plate, for example, could have very interesting ramifications to understand what kinds of future are the unconscious of our own society is projecting, what we are projecting forward as our own future. Whether or not you believe that this is a physical reality possibility or an alternative reality situation or simply a collection of the speakings of the subconscious mind of people today, you might think of it almost as like a Gallup poll of our subconscious. And therefore it has relevance to us because, of course, all of the subjects that we were working with are volunteers and are living here, either in America or in England, France, other societies in our world today. And therefore their view of the future is obviously in the unconscious mind something that is very important to try to see the probability of what we are projecting. So that was the method Dr. Wambach came up with. She worked with these large groups, putting them into a light waking trance state such that they would be able to be very aware of who they are today, and at the same time, nonetheless, get information, oftentimes in visual imagery, sometimes in audio, sometimes actually even to the point of being able to smell or to taste events that were suggested along a timeline. In other words, the information that was asked was such that you will now let yourself go forward and see if you have a possible lifetime in such and such a year. And we chose certain target dates for this study, the first one and the closest one to us being in the year 2100 to 2150. And we chose that very deliberately because in individual studies, Dr. Wambach and myself had found that when you attempt to take people forward, if you do so in the time of this lifetime, that is to say within the life expectancy that the person has in this current body, who they are today. Now, I'm a little over 50 years old, so a reasonable expected lifespan for someone of my generation would be about another 40 or 50 years. We've all heard of people who live to 100 years old. We've certainly, many of us, known people who've lived to 80 or 90 years old, but very few have an expectancy that goes much beyond that. So therefore, if you were to take someone from my generation forward in that 50-year window, you might find that the situation, the results, were not very easy to get, and in fact, oftentimes are very emotionally, how can I say, colored, I suppose, by the both desires and the fears that our consciousness in our body has as whom we are today, looking at our future, the whole concept of entropy, that things in the physical world tend to slow down after a certain point, and we don't like to face that, we don't like to see that. But if you go beyond that point, if you take someone 100 years, or 200 years, or 300 or 400 years, then those questions seem to fade away. It's a whole different life. It's a whole different consciousness, a whole different body that seems to be involved. And so it became much easier, and we found that this was also true in regression. It's much more difficult to do age regression with accurate results back into the early childhood period of someone in this body, in this life, than it is to take them back before that time into a past life. Whether or not the person believes in reincarnation, they can see it as an analogy or an allegory. Nonetheless, statistically accurate data was found that had to do with little-known facts of history when we took people back into historical periods. And so that's what we were doing in taking them forward into the future periods. And I want to turn on the slides. How do I do that? Is it on? Yeah. I think it's in the front of the machine. Put it all the way over. The same lever you were touching, you just have to keep going with it. Then maybe it's up to me. There we go. Okay. Might want to put that centered and do all the good things. That's the, can you get it high enough? Thank you, Vince. Okay, I think that's perfect. If that's all right for the tape. Looks like it to me. It's pretty much automatic focus. And one of the things that came out from this as we were doing this study, and that I insisted that the publisher put as a subtitle, was, "Do we face an apocalypse or a global spiritual awakening? The choice is ours." And I did that after we had done the book, after we had done the research, and after the results were starting to be tallied, because it became so clear with the results that, especially in this near-term period where occasionally people would go, even though we were focusing them on the area of 21 or 23 or 2500, that the issue that came up time and time again wasn't just a physical survival issue. It wasn't just an ecological issue, although that was very much part of it, which frankly, back in the early 1980s was somewhat surprising. It wasn't a time period when people, were massively involved in that, looking at the environment and a struggle to understand how we can better the environment, but that it was a spiritual question. And that the models that were being projected by people were either of an apocalyptic nature, that everything was going to go and everything was going to fall into the sea, and that the world was going to be turned upside down into an unrecognizable state, or there was the opposite scenario which appeared, which seemed to be that there would be some form of awakening that would be much beyond just a political or a social change in America and in the rest of the world, but that would touch at the spiritual roots of individuals and then as greater bodies of people all around the planet, and that this awakening would somehow metamorphose the possibility of this apocalypse, of this change, into something more positive, into something that would have meaning and that would lead us into, you might say, almost like a millennial concept of something much more positive for the future than might otherwise be seen. What was even more fascinating than this, and that was really extraordinary to me, that this was the issue, this was the question that came forward out of the subconscious of many hundreds of people as we did these progressions with them, but to ask them the very obvious and clear question, what kind of an environment do you find yourself in? And I tallied the results of the people from the 2100 to 2200 time period. There were a couple of hundred that had clear enough answers and results that they could be matched and put together. And it came up fascinating to me that only 4 basic kinds of environments emerged. One might think out of these hundreds of people that there would be many, many different types of settings, but these 4 emerged, and it's very interesting. This is only 100 to 150 years away, of course, but these 4 all have roots in certain movements, certain areas, certain types of events that are happening within our own world, and yet none of them actually describe our world. The one environment that didn't come forward was a land of more supermarkets, strip shopping centers, and freeways. I have to tell you. Right, and here we are right in the middle of it today. But this was not one of the 4 types. However, looked at more generically, the first type is fascinating because it was a life in space. And about 20% of our sample who went into this time period described living on some kind of space station or space platform. And after I got more involved with the native prophecies, I was fascinated to hear that the Hopi have a prophecy that the platform in the sky will be this civilization's last greatest achievement before the world changes and there is a significant alteration in our thinking and in the kind of civilization that we have. And you know that we are going forward today with an international project. I think they're just about to send up the first rockets that are going to put into place the docking station for the International Space Station. That's supposed to be larger than the football, professional football stadiums. That's how big it's going to be when it's finally completed and assembled. And so we are in that project now, and we're therefore seeing the germs, the beginnings of this idea of a life in space. And so a whole series of people in our sample went into this, and very interestingly enough, through the questions on their food, on their clothing, on their social life, on their behavior, it all came out quite correlating at a statistical level, which I go into in much more detail in the book than I will tonight, about how that matched with the environment that they found living on this platform, and in occasional cases, many, many fewer, but a few nonetheless, who were on research stations on such as Mars or the Moon or other bodies of our solar system, this being in 100 to 150 years from now. Interestingly enough, in that time period, no one found themselves on some kind of a life in a planet that was outside of our solar system. That didn't happen until we took people ahead another 300 years into the later time periods. And then suddenly a whole bunch of people finally saw themselves living lives at the places that they couldn't really describe very accurately or very well, because their frame of reference didn't match those of here on the Earth. But they were clear that these were on completely different solar systems in other parts of our galaxy, or even other galaxies. Almost as if there had been an opening, like a gate or a wave or something. Now, the other three societies were all here on planet Earth, therefore. The second one is perhaps best portrayed by this lovely drawing from Frank Lloyd Wright, the visionary architect, who had designed this house to be built in the area of Malibu. I don't think it was ever finally built. But what is quite interesting about it in terms of the survey, of course no one had seen this picture. This came out of an architect's, university architect's book that I found years later. And that had to do with the contours, the curving lines, the use of white, the use of towers, the use of this beautiful space. And the fact that this was in an environment that was pristine, either by the sea or with forests or mountains, and that everything was very harmonious in this lifestyle. And what particularly interested me to find this, and I call this the creative communities, because 90% of the people in these communities, when they were who had this lifestyle or this environment, when they were asked what they were doing, were in some form of a creative or spiritual occupation. They were either in teaching, or they were in the creative arts, or they were in acting, or they were in music, or they were having to do with spiritual teachings or healing. All of those kinds of creative arts and sciences were what were flourishing in these communities. The smallest part of our sample, by the way, only about 10% of the people went into this, but this was the group that seemed to have the best environment in the future that they had found. The third type, you may be familiar with the Biosphere 2 project, which has been going on out in Oracle, Arizona. Interesting name, out in the deserts near Tucson. And it was an attempt by a group to take people and put them in a totally controlled environment. Put them under glass, essentially, so that they could create an environment just as if they would be on Mars or on some other planet, and have to create their own oxygen, have to create their own carbon dioxide, have their own food, and be entirely in autarky for a certain period of time. If you followed the project, you know that it ultimately didn't succeed because there were some medical accidents, and also the generation of oxygen did not match the requirements of the people inside. There was too much CO2 generated, so they hadn't solved yet the pollution problems that we have on our planet. But they did make an attempt at it, and I think it's a worthwhile, something to be looked at. But this was very much like the Type 3 environment, where people found themselves living totally in artificial, sometimes even underground environments, with a very high technological component to it. And so I call them the high-tech people, or the techies, because they were attempting to solve problems around them by going into an enclosed environment and artificially controlled, instead of coming back to the forces of nature. As I later have worked with the more indigenous peoples, the native peoples, of course, they say, well, yes, that's sort of like the epitome of your culture. That's why we call you the people of invention, whereas we're the people of Mother Earth, because every time you have a problem, you try to solve it with a new invention, whereas we have a problem, we try to solve it by understanding our relationship to the Earth and to each other to take care of it. So this Type 3 then was the majority of our sample going into the 100-150 year period, and seemed to be the most widespread one. The most negative aspect of this had to do with the fact that outside these artificially controlled areas, it was very much like this Arizona desert. People saw almost an ecological wasteland around them, and as if what they had created inside by the technology was taking a toll on the natural forces and the environment outside their particular little group, or their domed city, or whatever you want to call it. And then finally the fourth type. And it was the answers in this type that actually helped lead me to some more of the research that I've done more recently, and particularly the work with the indigenous peoples, because a whole series of people found themselves in what I call the rustic community. About a third of our sample were in these rustic areas, some of them actually living lifestyles that we associate with indigenous peoples or Native Americans, others more like this Appalachian community. Here it's an auction of wagon wheels up in the mountains of West Virginia. And these were people that had gone back to the land, that had gone back and forsaken the high levels of technology and the artificially controlled environments, and in fact had gone out and were trying to do something about the ecology of where they were, the areas that they were in, and were attempting to live then a life, and the technology levels was similar to that of maybe our great-grandparents back to the early part of this century, somewhere around 1900. Very, very different than the other choices that seemed to be being made. So these were the four kinds of futures that people kept coming up with, coming and again in different groups. And I've continued on with this research, and it's very fascinating because I've now done this work in Brazil and in Argentina and in Switzerland, in Germany, in France as well again, and also in the United States. The most recent group that I did this progression with was just this summer in Switzerland, about a group of 40 people. And what I have found is that the four types of environments stay very much the same, but the proportions are changing. And I think that's very significant. We are now to the point that this is our majority group that people are seeing. About 50% are a plurality group, because it may not be quite 50%, but almost half of our subjects are now seeing themselves coming into this sort of more rustic type of environment. And the other, more technical one has gone from over half down to about a third now. So it's and the other two have stayed about the same. So it's very interesting how there seems to be a shift in the perception going on. It may be a generational shift, I don't know, because obviously when you do the same protocol over a period of 15 years that I've been doing this work, you find that some of the differences will come just by the generations that are attracted and come to volunteer to do the work. But it is significant to me that as we are building our future, our concerns for the planet, concerns for the Earth, may be beginning to take precedent over the earlier concept that by our technology we're going to be able to solve all of our problems, and as the natives say, would be only the people of invention and have nothing to do also with the turning toward the inner self. This may be part of that spiritual awakening that so many people have said was going to be necessary if we were going to change the coming changes in a positive direction. Just to recap a little bit, because it is important, I think, nonetheless, to go through this, one of the things that came forward very strongly in the People's Looks at Mass Dreams was the fact that this area of the world, the Pacific Rim, the very highly geological active area, and you see the red lines are the tectonic plate lines, is the area that is going to become more and more active as we move into the next century, into the new millennium. Particularly the areas where these red lines tend to meet, such as here, which is Japan, or down here in the Philippine and Indonesia area, or over here in the Pacific Northwest, or down in Central America. That these would be the places that there would be the most possibility for what we commonly call earth changes, that is, volcanic activity or earthquake activity in the future. And of course we know that some of these things are happening. People also talked about the great weather sweeps, the great weather changes coming out of the Pacific, and we know that much of the Earth's weather is determined by the currents of the Pacific Ocean, and particularly by the water temperatures and the lower level air temperatures of the Pacific Ocean. And when they change, then we have what the meteorologists are calling El Nino, but which for many has a source also underwater, that there is a heating in this area of the eastern Pacific underwater due to venting of volcanic nature that doesn't reach the surface. And that has finally begun to be recognized by the mainstream geologists. So this was one of the causes, you might say, of what people were saying of some of the changes that they were seeing coming in our near future, helping to create this series of 4 different types of environments farther along as we go down the path. Another theory that also came out of this, that may be explaining or attempting to explain some of the reasons why this is happening, is what's called the nemesis theory. Some of you may have heard about this. Sometimes it's called the Planet X theory, and of course in the works of Zecharia Sitchin, it's called the Nibiru theory, the idea that there is an extra planet in our solar system, one that we know mathematically should exist due to the ratios of the various outer orbits of outer planets and also certain gravitational anomalies in their orbits. But this would be a planet then. Normally the planets you see are very grouped together and they're along the plane of the ecliptic. This one would be at a very odd angle to all of that. Possibly, if the Sumerian records as looked at by Mr. Sitchin are correct, a wanderer planet that actually was attracted and captured by our solar system at a very, very early stage in its development and not from our solar system itself originally. And that this planet, as it would come back toward the center of the solar system every several thousand years, would have an influence of destabilizing the inner orbits, and particularly as it passed through the Oort cloud, it would send more comets and more meteorites and more asteroid-type bodies down toward the inner solar system, including those that would intersect the orbit of our own planet. And that in the past, either near misses or occasional collisions with the small fragments, fragmentary bodies from our own solar system, but who had been sort of moved through the magnetic force of this larger body as it came back toward the inner part of the solar system, then would have catastrophic impacts on our planet. Things such as the asteroid that hit in the Yucatan 65 million years ago and killed the dinosaurs, possibly others that had come more recent times and had, if not an actual impact with the Earth, had a near miss with the Earth and had such events such as the Exodus from Egypt and others that either are in our historical record times that the Sumerians talked about, and that their supposed gods, those who were beings who lived on this planet, who lived apparently under the surface of this planet and were much more evolved over their history than we are, and have space travel, at least of a solar system nature, the kind that can go within our own solar system, perhaps not a stellar space travel, but within our solar system space travel, could come here and could be actively involved in our evolution, and possibly, and I'm sure you're all familiar with Sitchin's work, have had a very determining role genetically engineering our own species as we are today, and putting us here, as it was clearly said in the book of Genesis, to be fruitful and to multiply and to labor the earth. And that was the original role for human beings here on this planet. And that it's possible that then, as this planet moves around in a very, very, very long orbit, that it's now again moving back through this Oort cloud, through this area, and that one of the reasons we are receiving more comets, more sightings, more asteroids, is not only that the scientific ability of our scientists to see these is improved, but also that we are going through a band again, or more are being sent in toward the inner solar system. Which finally brings me to the last slide on this area, which is the eclipse of next year. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the concept that we are going to have a very important total solar eclipse next August 11th in 1999. This is the path of totality of that eclipse. And it's a very interesting one because, as you see, it starts just off the coast of North America, goes through England, through the center of the continent of Europe, across the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, India, and ends in the Indian Ocean. Obviously, the timing would be when daylight hours are present so that you would actually see the sun be blotted out. And whether or not this will have a physical impact on humanity, of course, is very doubtful. In a strict scientific way, it would not. But it may well have an important psychological impact. And one of the things that may be important about it is that new techniques have been developed and are still being worked on, where scientists at a time of an eclipse can actually look into the corona of the sun and see if there are asteroids or small fragments of space bodies that are between the Earth and the sun that normally we could not see because of the sun's radiation, and that we could see it at such a time, and then we would be able to know if there are any more of such bodies that are headed in a collision or near-miss path with our own orbit in the next several years. And this is, of course, something that the people who do work with eclipses and are going to be very much looking to see for next August in this area. So these are parts of signs. I see them as signs of our times. Things like coming forward into more asteroids, more comets, more heavenly bodies having impact or having coming closer to us than we have had from the past. These are also signs that the native peoples have looked at. It was on the publication of my book, a little bit after that, that some of the spiritual elders of the Hopi people who live in northern Arizona, of course, I know that they would say we have plunked northern Arizona down on their territory, and that's a different point of view, but it's an important one. And they were very interested because they are a prophetic nation. They're a nation that has kept ancient prophecies of looking for signs of times going for many thousands of years. One of the signs, as they see it, comes from the Mayan calendar, which predates, of course, their own being in Arizona. And they've been heavily influenced, and they use a similar calendar to the Mayan one. I'm not going to go into the Mayan calendar tonight, but I did just want to show you the Mayan cycle. This is the great cycle of Baktuns, 13 Baktuns, or 13 periods of about 400 of our solar years. This cycle began at the time of Pharaonic Egypt, back in 3113 BC. And it goes around a wheel, each 13th of the cycle being delineated in our dates, in our time, all the way forward until the cycle ends at the year 2012, specifically in December of 2012. And you can argue whether it's December 16th, December 12th, or December 21st. There's differing different people have a different opinion on the exact day in our calendar that will be. But it's very clear that it's in that same time frame. And that this, according to the Mayans and according to the Hopi, is the ending point of a civilization, the ending of a world, as they call it. We are in the fourth world, according to these cosmologies, and we're moving into a fifth one. We're moving forward. And they're looking then for signs, things that will help them to understand at what point are we moving toward this world, and what will the conditions of the new world be? Will there be a positive conditions? Will there be conditions that are in harmony with the Mother Earth, that are in harmony with our inner selves, or are the conditions that will be going toward that third type of society, which is the one of invention, the one of artificial technology, the one of building everything and going inside a shell, you might say, to live? So one of the first signs that came forward in this century, and that are actually, we have had more and more of these coming forward, are the crystal skulls. I don't know if any of you heard the radio show that I did the other night. I understand that it isn't actually broadcast in LA, so probably not. But nonetheless, this is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, which came from Central America and is one of about a dozen such artifacts that we cannot even correctly or accurately tell their age. The finder, the person who actually discovered this skull, was a 16-year-old Canadian girl who was adopted by a British archaeologist who was down there in the 1920s. She has lived her whole life with this artifact because the native people to whom it was originally given, the chiefs gave it back, saying the skull says it should go with her. Her name is Anna Mitchell-Hedges. She now is over 90 years old, and she has been a resident of Ontario, Canada for most of her life. And she has said that the skull actually speaks with her, gives her communication, gives her information, and that it is a sign, and that more of these skulls are coming forward in our time. And in fact, this has been true. There have been discoveries since about the mid-1950s of more and more of these ancient skulls. I personally now have had about 5 of them in my hands. We had some of them come to Sedona last year. We may be doing another event with some others in Sedona in the future. They are part of this sign. They are coming forward apparently with information. You know, crystal structures and stores information. I didn't have time to put this in here tonight, but it's fascinating that in this skull, if you shine the light in the right direction, you can actually see a flying saucer. There's a very clear image of a flying saucer that comes forward. And there are some new books that go into this. Mystery of the Crystal Skulls is one of them that's just come out, showing the various research as to how these are helping to bring forward native prophecies, that they are actually foretelling part of these changes that are coming. Another important sign, especially to the native people of the plains and the Midwest part of America, has to do with the buffalo. The buffalo, of course, was their source of food, their source of shelter. The hides made their tents, and all types of things for their lives. The white civilization 100 years ago nearly wiped out the buffalo. For all intents and purposes, we did wipe out the buffalo. A few have survived, and now there are some herds of buffalo again, and even a few are arriving as ground meat in Safeway's meat counter. I saw that the other day in Sedona. I was kind of shocked. A big sign saying, ground buffalo meat for sale. So, no, never mind. We are raising them, apparently. But that's just, to me, on the positive side, that at least the species is not going extinct, or we couldn't be having them brought out for food again. But one of the most important prophetic signs for these people has been the concept that there would be a white female buffalo calf born, and that this buffalo calf would exhibit certain characteristics, and that it would be a sign that our world was coming back to a more close relationship with the earth and with white buffalo calf woman, which is the giver of many of the ancient sacred ceremonies. And in 1994, Miracle, a white buffalo calf, was born in Wisconsin to a German-American farming couple not far from the Lakota reservations. And many of the Lakota spiritual elders have gone there and have tested in their ways the birth and the now changing colors of Miracle, because that's part of the prophecy that is coming true, that Miracle is not an albino. She's actually now changed from white through yellow to reddish, and now going into brown. And these are all part of the sacred signs. So that here is an entirely different area. Right in our time period, we are seeing people who are saying, yes, prophecy is being fulfilled. We are coming into the time of changes. The Hopi people are part of this, as I said, and they called me to come to one of their villages in 1991. They did so in the month of February. Does that say anything to people here? Do you remember February of 1991? Or does our society go so fast? What were we doing? We were bombing Baghdad. That's exactly right. We're almost repeated it this November. Luckily not. But the Hopi had seen this as one of the signs that was part of their ancient prophecy. They saw it as the people of the moon, because of course, what is the symbol of the Islamic people? It is the crescent moon. So when the people of invention fight the people of the moon, is the way the prophecy went, then the purification will be very close at hand. And their code word, the purification, means the changing of our society, in a sense, the sweeping away of much of what they see as the negative aspects of our society, having to do with the non-utilization, proper utilization of ecology, of our environment, of non-respect for the two-legged creatures, for the rest of the world, and only thinking of our own selfish ways. So it was at this time that Grandfather Martin, one of the Hopi elders, shown here doing his weaving on his traditional loom, brought about a half a dozen non-Hopi people up to their reservation to see some of their signs. And the next slide must be taken off of the video, so if you can turn the camera onto me for that part. Because I have an agreement with the Hopi people. They very freely and lovingly allowed us to come, and they allowed me to photograph certain of their sacred symbols, but they asked that they not be in any type of a video or under any type of thing. So, all right, that's fine. And that is my agreement, and I always honor it when I give this talk. This very, very sacred petroglyph goes back thousands of years. It's been carved on these rocks in Arizona in a sacred and secret place that they took us to. And it is the Hopi book of Genesis, because it is the creation of our fourth world, the story. It goes in 3 levels. Here's the level of the earth. Here's the level of the sky. And here in between is the human level, our level. Now, this is a story of creation. So, inside the earth, there is a round room, an inner earth, you might say, that is part of their mythology, part of their philosophy, part of their spiritual teaching. And that at times, as each world comes to an end, those people that have kept the song of creation and the love of Creator in their hearts are taken from the upper world and put into this room where they are ministered to by beings who have an ant-like shape. Fascinating, isn't it? Who have a sort of insect-like, obviously not humans of our world, of our time, but some benevolent beings who take care of them. Then, at the right moment, they actually come out of that inner room like a baby coming out of the womb of its mother, and they form the society that will make the next world's generation, the next human beings for our world. Now, when they come out, obviously they come out in our world. This is the fourth world, formed as a man and formed as a woman. So here's Adam, here is Eve. Adam and Eve copulate. This is the time-honored symbol for copulation. And produce children. Part of the producing of children is, just as Cain and Abel in the Bible, they produce opposites. They produce the dualistic world that we live in, the world of good and evil, the world of positive and negative charge, you might say, in an electrical looking way. They produce then, as Cain and Abel, opposites, who, as twins, at the same time attract and repel. And there's a series of very beautiful stories of how Creator takes the twin forces and chains them to the two poles of the earth, the north and the south, and that way they keep apart and keep the earth spinning and in balance. But every now and then, some trickster, who of course is the coyote of the Native American peoples, comes forward and unchains the two. And what do? They rush at each other at the equator and they turn the poles upside down. They shift the poles, and of course the planet turns, and lots of civilization is damaged or destroyed. This is the world-changing aspect of our dual life, our dual world, this third dimension that we live in. And then finally the sky. Yes, and the sky mirrors the creation story here in our dimension, here within Mother Earth and here in the human level. Here is Mother Earth. Mother Earth is the series of concentric circles because life begins at the center and it's like a circle. It goes out and out and out. Then you have the influence of the solar disk or of the sky spirit. Those that come from the sky, as they're called, the star brothers, the star elders, who come to our earth, who bring knowledge to our earth, who in a sense fecundate our earth, mate with our earth, mate with the Mother Earth, with the energies here at Mother Earth, and produce then the new creation, the new world. The witness is the moon. This is the Hopi symbol for the moon, a full moon with a crescent inside. And actually when it's done in drawing, they draw a little animal. It's very beautiful. And here's the spiral, the symbol of time, the symbol of change, as we're moving from one dimension to another, from one world to another. So this is one of the most prophetic of the Hopi petroglyphs that are there in their sacred canyons. And what was fascinating to them, and what really got me into all of the research that I've been doing for the last 7 years, has to do with this part of this glyph. Because just about 2 weeks before I was invited to the Hopi elders, and completely independently, a man that I knew from England came to visit to Arizona, and he said, I have some pictures of some strange things that are happening in our fields that were in one of the local papers last year, that being, as I say, in January of 1991. And he showed me some pictures, and a couple of them seemed vaguely familiar to me, very hauntingly familiar to me, although they weren't anything that I had ever seen. And so when the Hopi called me and said, come up, and as Native people often do, there's no time schedule involved in these things. They called me at 8 o'clock one morning and said, you know, we're meeting this afternoon. Well, we want you here. This is about a 5-hour drive, 6-hour drive, of course, not as if I didn't have any patients to see or any life. No, that's not how it is. If you're supposed to come, you're supposed to come. So I went. And I grabbed the pictures up at the last minute, and one of them was this one, which is the same picture. This is the same. Now, this is in a slide form, and this was actually given to me by Barbara Lamb, who's here tonight, and I thank her. But it was the same glyph that had appeared that earlier year. And I took the picture on a piece of paper, a color Xerox, and the Hopi got very, very excited. They said, this is our petroglyph. That's when they took us out. Here's Mother Earth, the concentric circles. Here's the solar disk coming to mate with the earth. Here's the moon symbol. Here are the spirals. A sign, a very important one to them, coming true, showing that we are on the verge, according to their prophecy, of the change of the worlds, that our world is tipping out of balance, as they say, that we have lost the ability to take it back into balance at this point. This is their prophecy. And this sign is occurred in the fields in England. And what's fascinating to me is that these particular sets of signs occurred throughout the years 1989, 1990, 1991, up till about 1993, were the last ones that were close to this. And since that time, there have been no more that have been directly like this. Now, another very important sign that I had the picture of was this one. This one, they said, the earth is out of balance. Look, This is our symbol for balance, and it is in some of the petroglyphs, the symbol, these two bars in a circle, is the Hopi symbol for balance, for bringing things into balance. If you look at the picture from here over, it would be in balance, wouldn't it? To raise a circle with balance, another circle, and two more arcs. But look at this. All of this part is taking it out of balance. What is this? Well, if you look carefully, especially if you can, circles are always in crop circles, but if you took just this part, what would you find if you took the circle out? Think of it from the native person's perspective. Immediately, they said, it's an arrow pointing at the heart of Mother Earth. Mother Earth is being pierced by the arrow of you people and your war and your... And then, of course, I had to tell them, this circle appeared the day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, August 1st, 1990. So you begin to see incredible signs that were being given and that have to be interpreted, that have to be seen by people who have an understanding, and then bring that understanding together. Because just the Hopi understanding isn't enough. Just the Western understanding isn't enough. You need the synthesis of the two. This is true with all of these glyphs and the language that is being given to us. I call it an unfinished alphabet because there is no way that any one person here on the planet has been able to bring all of the crop circles that have appeared around the planet into one place together at one time. That would be a great dream, but it would take a Rockefeller Foundation probably to do it. And even then, many of the glyphs have never been photographed because people didn't see them in time, or the farmer cut the field down before they were photographed. These were the ones that got my attention, though. This is in England. This is the southwest corner of England. Cornwall, London's over here. This is the area called Wiltshire, or the Wessex Triangle. This is the approximate region in which at least 2/3 of the crop circle formations that have occurred since 1978 have happened across England. Now, since I drew this a few years ago, the triangle has actually expanded, and you might say a second triangle has now formed down here, that is including the area of Hampshire and part of Sussex. So we actually have two triangles now. And it seems that it's very interesting because the soil composition of this area has great similarities. It's a sort of a chalky kind of soil that has deep, deep water conduits going under large layers of chalk, and then you have the ground, the topsoil, and then, of course, that's where the plants grow in. So there is possibly some soil reason that crop circles are most common here, some earth energy reasons. This is very possible. But there are also obviously other and more symbological significant reasons. This area is a very high energy area, and one that has been continuously inhabited for at least 6,000 years. One of the oldest areas of known habitation in Western Europe and in England. Here is where Stonehenge is, for example. And less known than Stonehenge, but equally important, is Avebury, the place of the birds. This line is one of the most famous English ley lines, goes right through the triangle. It's called the St. Michael and St. Mary line. If any of you have studied earth energies, you know that it's a very important line that goes all the way down from Cornwall up to Norfolk, across England and into the North Sea, and on as part of a grid around the planet. And all the circles are where churches have been named to St. Michael along the line. Because, of course, the early church fathers built the churches on top of pagan temples. That was the way that you assured that the people would continue to come to church. Because they had gone to the temple to do sacrifice, so now they'd come to the church and get communion instead. And they'd pay the priest the money instead of giving it to the pagan priest. So this was a policy they followed, the energy lines, you see, right through this area of southwestern England. And so it is here that we still have the most crop circles. I think something like 75% of the crop circles of this last summer were in this triangle, and particularly right in this area around Avebury. More and more, it seems like the phenomenon has centered on that area of Avebury. Circles began, as I said, 20 years ago. At least the first recorded ones that we know began at that time in the modern era. They were simple circles. This one is in canola. You have canola oil on your shelf? Well, this is a canola field. It's called colza, or rapeseed in England. And so in the spring, this is the flowers come, and it's quite a sturdy little plant. Very incredible. The stems are at least 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. However, when they are bent into crop circles, the plants continue to grow. They are not broken off. They are only bent over as if there is a force within the plant itself that bent it over to about a 45-50 degree angle to the ground, and then it stays swirled in that formation. So the very first ones were circles and then rings. It wasn't until about 1983, and it's very interesting because that happened to be the same year Dr. Wambach and I were doing our future progression experiments, that the first, might call it, intelligent sign or symbol in the crop circles appeared that couldn't be gainsaid. And that was this one. This is known to the Native Americans as the sign of the four directions. The sign for Mother Earth. Here with the Creator circle, if you were to connect these points, it would be a circle, and surrounding the Earth, going in the north, east, south, and the west. Or in England, of course, this is called a Celtic cross, because it was a sign to the ancient Celtic peoples as well. And then in Christianity became the equal-armed cross, the Celtic cross. Very, very important symbol. Perhaps mankind's oldest religious, spiritual, geometric symbol. This collection of 5 circles. And usually, and oftentimes they were also connected by a ring. This one didn't happen to be. It was at this time that some research began into the crop circle phenomenon, because it couldn't be gainsaid. Something that was intelligent had to be behind or had to be involved when you see the perfect regularity and the obvious coming together of various circles. It's not just a random type of thing happening in a field anymore. Then, an incredible event happened in the summer of 1988. All of a sudden, around the area of Avebury, the ancient stone monuments of Avebury, and the oldest man-made pyramid in Europe, which is called Silbury Hill, suddenly 51 circles appeared all through the fields. And they appeared in a period of about a month. And so a field would have 5 circles in it. Then it would have another 3 or 4 circles a few days later. And then the field on the other side would have the circles coming in them. And this was in 1988, 1 year after the 1987 harmonic convergence, the bringing together of the Mayan calendar. Again, a very important time for the Hopi, a very important time for native peoples who were saying that this was the beginning of change that we had to mark and know what would be the signs that would be coming forward. So suddenly the crop circle phenomena went from a few isolated circles and rings to a few Celtic cross type formations to this. Very interesting, because if you take the number 51 and add the Avebury stone ring, which of course these surrounded at that point, you get 52, which is the sacred number to the Mayan people and to the many, many Native Americans. Because 52 is 4 times 13. 13 cycles of 400 years is the Mayan calendar of 5,200 years. So we're in a multiple or a dividend of that 5,200-year calendar when we look at what happened then in 1988. As I said, in 1989, the glyphs began to change even more, and the one that I showed you, the world out of balance, occurred. It wasn't until 1991 that a new breakthrough seemed to come. 2 very, very famous formations occurred on the same day. This was the one that's gotten the most attention. It's called the Barbary Castle Triangles, or the Christ energy circles. I lost my watch somewhere, I'm sorry. What was particularly interesting about this was that a book had been published just 2 weeks before saying that circles could come in various patterns, but they really were only natural phenomena after all, and that one of the ways you could know that they couldn't be real was that triangles couldn't be formed, that there had never been any triangles. So 2 weeks later, Barbary Castle came along. Yes, it's as if there's an interactivity and a playfulness. And that's another thing that I think you need to see when you try to understand crop circles, that it has an interactive character with human beings, and also that there is a certain level of humor involved and playfulness. And we keep getting told every time we put things forward, theories forward, whether you're encouraging or discouraging that theory. Now, an interesting sidelight to this has been the theory of 2 German researchers whose names are Koch and Kaiborg. And they put forward a theory that, in fact, what we were looking at here was a star map. Yes, there's some obvious mathematical parts to this. You can see that there's partly a mathematical language. But they said it's also a star map. And it's a little too long to go into as to why they came up to this conclusion. But they said that this triangle, this one, and the other one that appeared on the same night, which is this one, this is much less well known. It's called the Temple Farm crop circle, had to do with a signal from extraterrestrials who came from the second planet of one of the double stars of Alpha Centauri. And they said that these have to do with planetary orbits, and we're being shown here the orbit of Earth, and Earth with our moon. We're looking at a third orbit outside of a single sun. Now over here, and there's another circle there, we're looking at a double sun and a planet that would be somehow between them, or perhaps be in an orbit around the two of them. And so they said that this was showing, and they also pointed to other circles that had appeared before this particular one came along, excuse me, that we were then being given a message. Now if you go back to this one, and remember these appeared on the very same night, some miles apart. So it would have been very hard for good old Doug and Dave to go out and do both. The famous crop circle hoaxers who put their names all around the world with the help of some well-placed media advertising, that this is actually a map showing us a possible location for a very important ancient sun or a star that has a very important knowledge for the crop circle phenomenon. And this is part of what is called the winter hexagon. And there was an ancient mariners knew that in the winter sky in the northern hemisphere there are 6 prominent stars, including the belt of Orion. And if you took 2 of the stars of the belt of Orion, they point out toward another star. And in fact, you see there are 2 orbits, like 2 planets, going around this particular star. That's the meaning of those for this theory. And therefore, you would be looking for a star similar to the sun that is in orbit, is in a galaxy in the middle of this triangle, a part of the winter hexagram. Well, fascinatingly, they found that there is a G-type star, in other words, a star similar to our sun, that is in just that position in our winter sky. And we only know it by its numbers. And its number, if you want to look it up, is HD 42807. But we're not the only people that have known about it. Because in ancient Egypt, they had the star pointed out. This is from one of the tomb paintings showing Osiris, the Lord of the Dead, the belt of Orion, which modern research has shown is so important to the pyramids that the shaft of the king's chamber goes up to the central star of Orion. And here, just to show that it's not just the belt of Orion, but in fact where they're looking for is this star out here. Doesn't that look like this crop circle orbits? Going right out toward that star. This star, this area, was what the ancient Egyptians called the Duat, or the home of the gods. Quite frankly, where the soul was to be taken by Osiris for a new life in the ever after. So, this knowledge, apparently, these signs are something that is extremely, extremely old. These pyramid texts are, of course, 5,000 years old. Now, lest you think that this is absolutely impossible and that 5,000-year-old Egyptians, remember that's back at the beginning of the Mayan calendar cycle, could have no knowledge of anything as sophisticated as air travel, let alone space travel or gods coming from another star. I want to show you something from the temple at Abydos, a shot that was taken by a little lady in tennis shoes who's from Fountain Hills, Arizona. Some of you may even know her. I will not name her. She is a MUFON member in Arizona, and she was on group there with, I think it was with Drumvalo Melchizedek of all people, and she wandered off and she said there was this tape not to go into this part of the temple because some of the plaster was falling off, but she had the intuition she had to go there, and she just took her little camera and snapped up the wall until the guards came and got her back to the group. And when it was blown up, that's what they found. These are over 5,000 years old, ladies and gentlemen. rudders, ships, saucers, helicopters, blimps, or cigar-shaped craft. And she said I could show the pictures, but I'm not going to tell her name, because she's still just a nice little lady in tennis shoes who enjoys her life in Fountain Hills, Arizona, being retired, and doesn't want men in black appearing at her door, which I don't blame her. But isn't that incredible? These are not faked pictures. Now, you see there's one up here, and this just even goes further. Look at this. This was the original Apollo mission patches. You see what? Belt of Orion, the triangle, and of course then the Earth and the Moon superimposed on it. This was taken off and redesigned because it was considered to be too phantasmagorical for the public to accept before the astronauts ever landed. So you will never see this in any of the pictures. But this was the original design patch. And it was, some people had kept it, and my friend got a copy of it. And she let me photograph it. But I just want to show you. Now, do you see how they're related? These crop circles in England, to the Apollo missions to the moon, to the ancient Egyptian. I'm taking you on a long journey here, but to the indigenous peoples of the Americas, but they are related. They are all pointing to our time and the signs of our time. As Bob Dylan once said, the times they are a-changin'. This is about change. It is about the imminence of change that we are going through and will be going through. Also in that summer of 91, by the way, summer of 91 was the summer which the most crop circle formations appeared in England in the 3-month growing period of the English crop fields. I think that there were over 100 different formations appeared in that particular year. This is a Mandelbrot set, a fractal. You mathematicians know all about fractals. I have to admit I'm not a mathematician, but I know that fractals are only supposed to be able to be generated by computers. And if you put enough fractions into a computer, eventually you can get a graphic. And they thought that the graphics would just explode out in chaotic nonsense. That was the original theory. That was the original thought that was going to happen. It was going to show how chaos ruled the universe. Well, guess what happened? When they put all those fractions in there, they came up with these beautiful, gorgeous, infinitely repeating designs, which they have now come to understand are the building blocks of material life. And that if you were to take a photograph of a natural setting, like a coastline, for example, and blow it up and magnify, or go farther and farther and farther up away from the Earth like a satellite, you would end up getting fractal designs along the coastline. Designs that ultimately come into patterns that are of great beauty. Well, these are only supposed to be able to be produced by computers. This was by Dr. I think it's Emile Mandelbrot, a French professor of mathematics who works at Cambridge. He's a teacher, a professor at Cambridge. So guess what? On August 19th, I think it was, 1991, this appeared 4 miles from Cambridge. Oh, of course, it was just a college student prank. That was what was in all the papers. Nevertheless, it was only supposed to be able to be reproduced on a computer, not in a wheat field. Now, it gets a little sinister here, but you're at MUFON, so you're used to that kind of understanding. This was when all the hoax business got started. The day after this appeared, and luckily after some people got some photographs, one person got in it to get some samples. The next day, the Army bought the field and they burned it. That's the only knowledge, to my knowledge, the only time a field's actually been burned. Sort of like going back to the Salem witches or something. I don't know what they thought they were exorcising, but they were very, very afraid, is my take on it. And it was just after that Doug and Dave were hauled out to tell the whole world that since 1978 they had created all the crop circles. Up to that time it had been pretty much ignored, you see, by official type forces. Well, you guys investigating unidentified flying objects sites understand so well all of the chicanery that can be involved in the disinformation and misinformation and campaigns. So I don't have to explain it to you. We're not in unidentified flying objects, we're in unidentified field objects. See, that's our UFOs. This is this is a crop circle that I took. I happened to be the first one into this beautiful formation that came in the summer of '92, and I thought it was time to give you a close-up shot. Remember, the grain is bent over but not broken. It is still living. You can see how it's in beautiful formation, laying down, quite crisp along the edges. Doug and Dave, of course, after they made all of their claims, some of the experts, including Colin Andrews and others, challenged them and said, you've got to make a crop circle in broad daylight where everybody can see it and do it. That's their circle. Just to show you. I want to show you what the circle makers can do. This is before all the hoopla about teams going out and making circles. This goes back to 1992. It's very interesting. It was Michael Hesman and I were the first two to get down into this. This was the one that was researched by Dr. Stephen Greer and the C SETI group, and a beautiful triangle, 3 circles. And then Doug and Dave. Now, this is just a very, very little bit out of Hesman's book in German about the scientific aspect of circles, because that's not my bent, but it is important. And I think it's a crucial part of understanding that this hoaxing is a red herring. It is wool being pulled over your eyes. 1 or 2 circles may be hoaxed. I suspect that the only ones that are hoaxed are when they have called out the TV cameras for Arthur Clarke or the Discovery Channel and have the farmer's permission and go out in the field and do it, and the cameras roll with their infrared and they take pictures. Because you know one thing? There are rewards posted for people trespassing in crop fields overnight in England. This is damaging private property. And in 20 years, there has been no arrests. No one has ever been arrested overnight in a crop field. Now, either the English police are the poorest in the Western world, which, being an avid Sherlock Holmes supporter, I might think is possibly true. Nonetheless, I find it hard to believe that in an area that's only the size of that triangle, and it's not all that big, it's maybe 60 miles to a side. You know, we're not talking the state of Iowa even here. No one has been arrested in 20 years, and yet thousands of formations have occurred in that 20-year period, many times in the same fields, again and again, one every year. So here we have some interesting scientific investigation. If you look, this is the kernels of wheat within the circle. This is the kernels of wheat outside the circle. You can see how shriveled, how shrunken it is. So it's as if something has pulled all the water out of the kernels inside the circle. Something very fast. It would have to be strong enough to vaporize the water. And yet, the grain continues to live. Now, explain that, but that is what happens. That is the scientific fact. The stems at the outside, the stems at the center, and the stems inside but near the edges. You see the degree of bending changes. And it changes at what's called the nodal points. Well, that's very smart, because nature has designed crop stems to grow with these little nodes that are like joints, just like you have fingers with joints, you know. Nature is wonderful, very creative. And so whoever is doing the energy that is changing the crops and bending them is taking advantage of nature's normal curving, natural. This is in harmony with the earth, with nature, you see. And moving and changing and bending the plants. Now, I don't have this picture here, but I've actually been in the fields, and Barbara can attest to this too, that if the change has taken place in the early part of the growing season, by a month or so later, the stems are going back up toward the sunlight again. In other words, you have almost an S curve taking place. And the shoots are going back because they're looking for maximum sun. So the circle is laid over, but there will be many of them starting to flow back up again. Now down here is a cellular look. This is what a normal wheat kernel looks like at the cellular level. Over here, if you'll notice, you might see all the little black dots. This is a crop circle grain. And what has happened is that's exploded where the water vapor has pushed out. So it's a force has come that has so changed that in a millisecond or a tenth of a second or whatever, very short period of time, not enough to kill the cell, but enough to explode the vapor, water out as vapor. And so this is what's called the famous blown nodes that are talked about in crop circle study talks. That the nodes actually, you can sometimes see a little pinhole, a little blackened hole in the node itself. It's particularly the lowest one where the bend occurs, down near the ground. Also, oftentimes, the sheaves of the wheat stalks are almost wrapped like in little bundles and laid over. This doesn't happen from stomping on them with a board. You have to have some force that goes around them centrifugal type force, and lays them down. Now, I am not here to tell you the be-all and end-all and answer to crop circles and who makes them and why they make them and exactly how they make them. Because anyone who is truthful in this field, if they are honest with you, will tell you they don't know. And I don't know. We don't yet. We are coming closer with the help of people like Dr. Levengood in Michigan and the photographers and the researchers who go out and do this measuring and understanding of where we're getting to. But we don't know the exact causes and forces yet. Some of this stuff seems to be at a very highly sophisticated electromagnetic nature. There have been magnetic studies in the crop circles the day they appear. It only lasts about 72 hours, then it starts to fade away. And it drives the compasses crazy. And sometimes it'll drive the compass crazy at 1 foot above the ground, but not at 6 feet above the ground, above where the crop would be. It's very specific, you see. And so they're high levels of magnetic energy. If you go in crop circles the first couple of days, many people get a buzz, especially sort of intuitive people. That's anecdotal, but it happens. I've not known anybody who goes into crop circles, if you go into more than 2 or 3 a day, that you don't get terribly, terribly thirsty by the end of the day. It's as if it's almost drawing energy out of you, even though the circle has already formed. No one has ever actually eyewitnessed a crop circle. The Oliver's Castle video, to the contrary, I don't believe in it. And they've ear-witnessed them. I guess that's the best way to put it. They've heard noise when they have occurred. But it may be dangerous to be where a crop circle occurs. Look what happens to that grain of wheat. Imagine that being your cells. It wouldn't be too comfortable, I wouldn't think. So it may be that they are very carefully controlled as to how they are put and where and when they are put, so that no one will actually be there. It is kind of, again, one of those little humorous things, a little trickster part. In the early days, they set up all kinds of cameras and teams and infrareds, and they went out in fields and they did field watches, and everywhere they would set their cameras and put it all, no crop circles would appear, but about several times behind them on the opposite field. So they turn all their equipment around. The Japanese spent over $1 million one summer, and then they got very fed up, as you can imagine. And every time they would go to a new field, it would appear in the field where they'd just been. And if they stayed there, nothing would happen. So you see, there is a very interesting interactive nature to this. And as I say, it may be dangerous for us to be right in the line of fire. I don't know. This is the other experiment that was done. A Canadian researcher took some grain from a Canadian crop circle. One of the problems with the grains in English crop circles in terms of trying to grow it is that it mostly is hybrid grain. And you know what happens with hybrid grain. It doesn't grow very well. The seed companies have treated it so that it won't grow. In other words, so that the farmers are dependent on buying new grain from the seed companies. I don't know if you saw this recently, but there's Monsanto has a new technique, and they're going to start introducing it next year, that the grain will kill the offspring. The plant will kill its own offspring. It will be edible grain, but it will have no life reproductive force. It's the perfect seed crop for these companies. This isn't me. This is this is out there. This was in the newspaper. We saw it, and with the new genetically modified strains, this is what they're doing. They're genetically modifying the strains. Well, in Canada, they still have good old-fashioned normal wheat. So Chad Dietken, who's a very good researcher, a personal friend of mine from Vancouver, got some from a Canadian circle, and he planted it. Now, he put it in adverse conditions. He put it in the shady side of his house. Normally, wheat should grow in full sun. And then he took some control wheat from the outside of the circle. Guess which one is the crop circle wheat? This one. It germinated faster. It grew faster. And he didn't, I don't know if he took it on to actual making, flowering and making the wheat or not, but he grew it up through this, at least this far. He could tell after, I think this is like 4 weeks, that significant more potency in the crop circle wheat than in the normal wheat. Now, nobody has collected crop circle wheat, to my knowledge. Nobody has stored it. Where is our Joseph? If you remember your biblical story of Joseph and the dreams, the 7 good years and the 7 lean years, where is Joseph to get people to go out and gather that grain up? There's nobody doing it. Now, and again, what they're going to do is all the grain is going to be killer grain anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. But fascinating to me, research showing that the crop circle, even though the grains are all shriveled up, they're more potent. This is from the 1992 Crop Circle Gallery. magazine in England started doing this, and it's real nice for people like me because I don't have to show you 10 slides, which I couldn't possibly get in. I can let you see 10 pictures. Here, the same kind of formation that I showed you before continued in 1992. One that they called the giant snail. It was very interesting, beautiful energy. You were in that one, weren't you, Barbara? Yes. In fact, I think we met in that one. Yeah. This is the triangle one that I was showing you, that I showed you the lay and the circle close up. Interesting one with almost some sort of patterning outside the ring. I'm not sure what it could mean, but you see the variety of types and shapes. Still rather simple, though, if you look back in 1992. Linear, sometimes triangular, sometimes just a collection of circles. Look here with an astrological symbol, beginning of the Hopi moon symbol. One of the Hopi prophecies was that before the changes could come to the earth, two things had to happen. The eagle must land on the moon. Well, we gave them some help, didn't we? Apollo astronauts landing the eagle. And the second one was the moon had to appear on the earth. And in 1992 that occurred. The first crop circle to show a crescent moon. And this is exactly the Hopi symbol with the full and the crescent joined together. Again, when they were shown this, they got very quiet. And they said, it's coming. One more sign has come. 1992 crop circles. This is the formation in Canada that Chad took his grain from. And I have an interview that was done with me and Chad Dietken over the telephone, by the way, in the back. I have a few copies if you're interested. It goes into much more detail on his work and my own that I can't do more. You know, I have to show you just what I can tonight. Look at the symbol, though, the four circles. Also, look, in Canada, there are no tractor lines. And look, the circle has never been touched. No footprints in or out. Here you can see the farmer's gone in and looked at, but not at this one. Now, look at this symbol here. These are the Anasazi ruins in Chaco Canyon. Same patterning of their ancient kivas, the ceremonial kivas. It's also similar to the Celtic cross. And it gets even wilder. Guess where this is? There we are. Same patterning. The city is laid out in the equidistant cross pattern, directly in line with the face. So you see, as above, so below. If you're familiar with Richard Hoagland's work, you know that there is one spot on the planet Earth that most closely resembles the geometry of Cydonia. Where is that? No. It's Avebury in England, right where the crop circles come. Look at the video, you will see. He talks about the geometry. There's a pyramid at Avebury. It's called Silbury Hill. It's the oldest man-made pyramid in Europe. There are only 3. 2 of them are within 10 miles of Avebury. The third one is in Russia. Now, there may have been more that didn't survive, but in England there are pyramids. Yep. They just call them hills because, of course, they're grown over. I'll show you a picture a little later of Silbury Hill. 1993 gallery. We're beginning to get into more complexity. Look at this finale. This was the last one of the season. I think it was the 1st of September. It's based on a geometry of 5 and 10. Again, the concentric circles, the 5-pointed star, 10 petals. Here's another beautiful one that had significance to the Hopi, because this symbol in the center is a very ancient Hopi symbol that's a symbol of the star knowledge coming to the earth. It's a symbol of the two forces joining, like joining hands. And it's on some of their ancient stone tablets, which they won't show, but there's a drawing of one of them. It's part of the Bear Clan tablets, those that are interested. Again, a few more of the long shape that we saw before. And for the first time, they began to come in significant numbers in the United States. This one's in the state of Washington. This one is in Holland. So after 91, 92, the phenomenon began to spread. It is an evolving phenomenon. into other countries. Now, I believe they have found circles in up to 34 countries. Is that right? Something like that. 32, 34 countries. Over 30 countries around the world, including Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Canada, America, Brazil, I know in the Czech Republic, Holland, Germany, France. A very interesting one in France, which is a country dear to me, as I say. And I only found this out last year, but it happened in 1995, and I don't have the picture of it to show you. But it was a very lovely set of circles. I think there were 12 circles, and it appeared on the noontime news. And there was just one little shot of it with a little, commentary on, look at the strange thing that happened in the field near Paris. And then it wasn't on the news anymore. Well, in France, the news is much more controlled over here. And somebody tried to call the station, and they said, oh, there was never such thing on the news. But it turns out that that field is next to one of their prime nuclear facilities. So, of course, they don't want people going there. It's very interesting. This one at Kennewick is right outside the nuclear facilities as well. There have been several that have come in America that have been near to nuclear or Air Force facilities. There's even been a couple of sand circles in New Mexico, interestingly enough. Moving forward, 1994. What was the most significant astronomical event of 1994? Well, here it is. Shoemaker-Levy, plummeting into Jupiter. It broke up, as you recall, into 21 fragments, and they hit between July 16th and July 22nd of that summer. In the same summer, in England, up until July 15th, a series of circles that have rarely been seen before, never been seen before, and interestingly enough, only in this last season have we had some similar ones appeared. This one was July 15th, the day before impact. This one wasn't in your papers. Look at, what does Jupiter have on it? A big spot, doesn't it? Called the red spot. Look at coming in. There were a series of these up until July 16th, and then there were no more until this year. And interestingly enough, this summer, a series of the similar circles started to appear again. This one was in June, I think, of 1998, in Barley. Now, they've been calling these the scorpion. People like to give a name, I don't know. But in any case, or the dragons. Because this was a year that a series of people working with Earth energies in England have been working on the constellation Draco. Here's another one that occurred. This was about a week before the one I just showed you, in another field about 10 miles away. This is in barley. That's why it looks so fuzzy. Barley is more fuzzy than wheat, and when it's patterned from the air. And then in the field opposite this one, up across the road in July, this occurred. This was very powerful, particularly up in here. All these little circles. I don't know, there were about 20 of them. This demonstrates also what, unfortunately, all too often happens when crop circles appear. People pay no attention to the natural tram lines where you can walk in and out of the field without damaging the crop, which is, of course, still a cash crop for this farmer, and desecrate the field. And that's unfortunate because of what it does. It turns the farmers against anybody coming into their land, and researchers are then turned away. And sometimes the farmer even plows down that part of the field. There were cases this summer, I understand, of at least 2 formations that no one ever got a picture of. One was a beautiful Star of David that someone saw, but they didn't have a camera. And by the time they went to get it, up in the air to get a picture, well, the farmer had said, nope, I don't want any of those crazies in my field. Of course, they all believe that they're hooligans that come out from pubs and create these things. That's what they've been taught to believe. And that's what they would prefer to believe. And so he just knocked down that part of the field so nobody would come in. That's why it's an unfinished alphabet. Here's 1995. Now look at the change between 1994 and 1995, the post-Jupiter era. All of a sudden we're talking about looking like asteroid belts or solar systems, magnetic flux, stars, all kinds of things. This one created a certain amount of furor because it's the one they called the Earth is Missing. Since there were 3 bands going around a central circle, and the third one didn't have any little circle on it. The other ones all had a circle like a planet. And the third one out didn't have any circle. So they said might be Earth. And out here is the asteroid belt. To me, it was more significant that this outer circle had 13 counterclockwise circles and 52 clockwise circles, back to the sacred numbers of the indigenous peoples. There's always a reason. Some beautiful ones. This one looks very much like a semaphore. It was like a track, and all the lay of the wheat was going out. You had to walk into the center through the tram line, and then you could walk out. It was like an initiation path, and then all around the circle. (1996). Again, some beautiful fractals began in 1996. This is the Julia set, or Nautilus, based on the golden mean, the perfect geometric averaging that is seen in... and it's too bad about the focus of this, because these slides, of course, I'm taking a picture of a... I don't think you can do anything about it. It's a little out of focus. This one also was right opposite Silbury Hill. This one they call a Vesica Pisces. It's two overlapping circles, like making crescent moons. There, thank you. And in the center was another circle. Down here is one that my wife and I discovered on the day after the Mayan New Year, the end of July. And there were 196 circles going out in 3 spiraling arms, like a galaxy spiral. 2 of the arms went out in a clockwise direction, that is to say the wheat was turned in a clockwise direction in each circle, and the third one was in a counterclockwise direction. And the energies were very different between them. This one, which occurred in June, many people liken to a DNA spiral. Others who have a more spiritual nature said that it's a rosary opened, because there are exactly the same number of circles in each chain as there are in an open rosary. You can take your pick. Crop circles are multidimensional in meaning and in nature, and therefore mathematicians and religious people and artists and native people and people who are interested in sociology, all kinds of different people can find something of interest inside and with crop circles. This is a close-up of that one that they've called the DNA, or the rosary. And I particularly liked it because we don't often get shots at so low an angle and yet high enough to really see the patterning. Look at how delicate the weaving is and where they meet. These are people, to give you an idea of the size. These are big formations now. They started out as little circles, maybe 10 feet in diameter, 20 feet. Now they stretch. One formation actually stretched 9/10 of a mile down a field. Another one was about 6/10 of a mile. Those are the 2 longest. This is a very beautiful one that wasn't on the other list of the 1996 ones. And I show it for 2 reasons. One is, I'll show you in a minute what it resembles. But also, this is one of the very rare crop circle formations that has reappeared in identical form in practically the same field 2 different years. It occurred in 96, and it occurred this summer as well, in 98. This is at Martok, which is a little village, and it's funny because, there's nothing to distinguish this village from any other. It's not within the triangle. There's no reason why there should be a crop circle form here. And yet, I looked up this summer, what is Martok known for as a village? And I found one of those really, good English guidebooks. And it says Martok is known as the village of angels because the village church is decorated with more angels than any other church in England. My mouth dropped open. Because in 1996, 2 weeks after we visited this circle and I got these pictures, my wife wanted to go to the cathedral at Chartres, because even though she's from France, she'd never been there. Well, guess what is in one of the main windows of Chartres? Christ and the angels. I'm not making it up. It's there. You just have to look. Multi-dimensional meaning. This was a very beautiful one. You could look at it as phases of the moon or the sun and the moon. This was in 1996 again, and I wanted to show it to you because for the first time, the actual lay of the wheat within the formation began to become as much of a part of the story as the overall pattern that you see from the air. Look at that. Up to 6 layers deep. And of course, within a few days when people walk on it, it kind of messes it up. But at the beginning and how it is formed, completely independently laid over each other. And throughout this formation, there were like rivers of wheat laid like this. And ever since that year, and it's come more and more importance in the last 2 years, that small circles, little fractal circles, or even the lay within big complicated formations has become so complicated in and of itself that it becomes part of the story. One formation this last summer in 1998, there were 3 different layers of lay of the wheat. The bottommost one was only 3 stalks thick at some places and formed a separate geometrical pattern than the top one, which is what you saw when you walked or looked at it from the air. Completely a different story is being told at different levels, different layers. Maybe this is trying to show us the multi-layered aspect of our world, or the multi-dimensional aspect of reality. I don't know, but it is fascinating to see how this has come out in the last 3 years, one of the, to me, most important evolutions of the crop circles. Here's the half of the best of 1997. The ant, dear to the Hopi. The beautiful gyroscope, 14 rings. 6 crescents spinning around a central circle. This was in rapeseed or canola oil seed. Some people have called this the dream catcher. 12, based on the hexagram divided into 12 levels, like spokes. And then the fractals. This one being the most complex fractal we've ever received. It's called a Koch curve. It's doubled and turned in on itself, and there were 198 circles. The most that have ever been in any formation to date. This is last year, 97. And even in 98, we didn't have any that matched that number. So it's still the champion. The other half of that year. This was another fractal, Koch Star of David it was called. The Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, from the Kabbalah. You see the religious spiritualism, the Bethlehem Star. Some people call this one the goddess. Harlequin, a snowflake that one of our native indigenous people here in Arizona has called, he said this is the Sundance tree. The 6 dancers that dance around the pole at the solstice. This for you engineers is a perfect torus. Toroid shape. Aerodynamic. 3 dimensions made into 2. A close-up, just to show you one of the fractal circles of that Star of David. Now I don't even know how it could begin to be done in broad daylight by somebody who knew what they were doing or who knew how to weave wheat, let alone in the middle of the night. I mean, it's just, to me, these are so incredible when you see them up close. This particular circle, I was so energized. Barbara remembers because she saw me right after that, and I was leaping around telling everybody, you've got to go over there, you've got to go over there. I couldn't stop. It was, and there were 126, and there were about at least 30 or 40 of them that were all different. I couldn't possibly show them all, but I wanted to show you one representative one. Look at the double twirling twining. 1998. 33 rings. These are actually a very complex geometrical curving pattern. Each one of these rings is formed by an arc of a circle. And you only see that little bit to make a 33 ring chain. 33, of course, this very important number for many mystery schools. This is in canola or rapeseed, and it occurred in April. No, I'm sorry, it occurred the first week of May. It was just for May Day. A couple of weeks later, at the beginning of June, another beautiful star in a mandala. This is in early wheat. July 4th, fascinating. For the first time, we reached 7-level geometry. Count. 7 crescents going around a wheel, almost like a blade or something. If you know geometry, you know that 7 is a very difficult figure to make because the angles that are required to divide 360 into 7 are in no way a whole number, and they never come out a whole number. And these are perfect, absolutely at the correct degrees for each of the crescents. And this was in Hampshire, which is the next county over from Wiltshire, and it was at the just at the base of a hill of a very important Iron Age settlement and fort that's called the Danebury Hill. Later on in the summer, a month later, 2 more sets of circles appeared on the same hillside, so that they ringed around the hill by the end of the July. This was the beginning of July, and the others were actually the 2nd of August, I believe, but in about a month and a half's time. But so we moved this summer. This was another part of the evolution into 7-level geometry. A week later, this appeared. This is 7 petals of a rose, I call it. Look at how the lay of the wheat is done in such a way that from the air it looks like a jewel. And there were 7 times 6, what is, I don't even, I can't, my math is failing me. 42, so there were like 84 circles around it, I believe. Double 42. Again. And there was a little circle right in the center that was twirled in its own way. This is became sort of the symbol of the crop circle season, in part because it appeared in a field where there have been important circles going back to the late 1980s, and the farmer is very sympathetic, and so he allowed there was a crop circle convention, you might call it, and he allowed the 147 participants into the circle. Now my math is coming back to me, and it was only there that we realized when we all gathered that there were 147 circles around it. That's right, there are 147. 21 times 7. And that was led by Bear Cloud Berry, a Native American from Sedona, who did a pipe ceremony in the circle. This is the geometry of that 7-petaled circle, done up by a, this is the number that you have to go out. It's like pi. That's the angle that these must be to make 7. A young Dutch guy. All of this is part of the crop circle calendar, by the way, that we have imported from England, that I have back at the table in the back. These drawings are all in there, along with the pictures of the main 1998 formations. Look at this one. This was a little farther away. It was in the central part of England, a little farther north, and obviously has an Egyptian connotation. And again, look at this. No footprints. Beautiful 5-pointed star. Very complex, the way the wheat is standing or laying down around in the circle. Another beautiful one that occurred just outside of Avebury, I call it the lotus. To me, it's like a lotus flower. And if you counted the circles going down, there were, guess how many? 52. Sacred number. And if you stood down in here, my wife, who's a sensitive intuitive, said it was like raising the kundalini. It was like when you walked back up. Every circle was clockwise. So if you wanted to walk it correctly, you had to 52 times turn around. This is that circle to show you in the big circle, how the lay was so complex again. This was up in here somewhere, right there. You can see it's like flowing over itself, creating the pattern within the pattern. The day after, this Julia set occurred next to Silbury Hill, and there's the pyramid. Now you see how much it looks like a pyramid if you look at it the right way. Have to see it from the air. It's along a busy highway. And see the circle in the center of the square? This one all turned counterclockwise. And underneath, this is the one that had the 3 levels. There was an actual square, and then there were little triangles that were inside in each of the arms. And then there were 96 little circles outside. This one appeared just on the other side of Avebury, the stone circle monument. And if you stood up on the edge of if you've been to Avebury, you know there's an earthwork as well, and it goes up about 12 feet, and you can stand up on top of this earthwork and look out, and you could look out right on this, and if you looked out from that angle, it looked for all the world like a flying saucer. It was just like a disc, particularly in the afternoon with the sun at the right level. This one was taken almost directly above it, but look, the little thing, and the wheat is standing here, and then it's laying down in a perfect symmetrical pattern, an oval pattern. August 6th, this, I don't know how to describe it, appeared. It depends again on who you want to talk to. One gal, the first day that we were in it, was running around, it's a spaceship, they're landing. That was an interesting kind of commentary. And you know, it does have a little bit of a kind of a shuttle look to it, particularly up here. And it all focuses in, and this, can you see it? It's barely visible. There's a tiny little circle there. And the wheat is completely plighted, like tressed into each other in that circle. And all the rest then goes back. And then the rest of it looks very much like the other lotus flower that occurred the day before. No, a week before. This was August 6th. The other was July 22nd. Another star. The first time a pentagram has appeared, and then on that was one 5-pointed star, and on that another 5-pointed star. This was in the same field, but 10 days afterward than the one I called the Kundalini lotus. The one with all the long circle, the tail. It was at the other end of the same farmer's field, near to Avebury, again about 1.5 miles from Avebury Stone Ring. Another third time for 7-level geometry, 7 divided ring, and this one had 84 circles on the outside, and I don't remember how many on the inside. There were another, I think it was 70 something. Maybe it was 77 on the inside. So again, a very high number of fractal circles, all going clockwise with the exception of 4, and I don't remember, but they were like out here. Every 7th or 8th one, there was one that went the other way. This was the 10th of August in a little farm 10 miles or so from Avebury. This is one of the small circles. I couldn't resist to show you a couple of them to see the intricacy with which the wheat was woven together. I think I have 2. Nope, only had room for 1. I'll go back. But there were others in which it wasn't. This is a double center. And there were others that were 1 center. All the ones that I saw were clockwise. As I say, there were 1 or 2 that were not, but they were more simple in design. Another first that happened on the 16th of August after my wife and I had left England, but the coordinator of the Wiltshire study group sent me the pictures, is this occurred in linseed or flax. Fascinating because it had some very intricate designs. Not symmetrical, Maybe I'm too influenced by the field of dreams, but I thought this looked like a baseball diamond. And she sent me a couple of close-ups. See the flowers in the circle being woven together. You see, actually, all this field is with little blue flowers that are the flax flowers. It's what they make flax and linseed oil out of. An incredible experimentation is going on. A doctor from England has a method whereby he can photograph light going through water. And normally it has random patterning. But he took water that he had already photographed, knew it was pure water, and put it in the linseed crop circle. And then after an hour, took it out or something like that and photographed it. You see the normal drops are like this around, but look at the central one. It's changed its pattern. So the circle, the energy, has actually changed how light reacts in a sample of water just put in a glass beaker and let sit there and then taken away and photographed in a studio. So even if you walk in one, what the human body is 80% water, you are getting a change. Something is happening. And we're just getting evidence of this. His name is Dr. Schweitzer, David Schweitzer. Some of you may have heard of his research. He's done this with human blood because they're doing something with cancer research with this. And he just got attracted to the crop circles last year. And one of the photographers or one of the researchers, Lucy Pringle, had sent him some samples without telling him what circles they were from. And when he photographed them, each one was different. And this looks very similar to the little flowers, you see, the little linseed flowers. And so he got very excited when she sent him what the circle looked like, because they resembled each other in the energy. And so then he started doing some himself, and this is the one that he was most impressed with from this summer, from August. Finally, the last crop circle from the summer, at the about the 20th of August, the season was just about over, and at a very beautiful place called the Sanctuary, which is was the site of an ancient stone circle. The stones have been removed, but there are little markers now that you can see. It's still a very high energy site near to Avebury, part of the Silbury Hill Avebury complex. Look at these beautiful moons, crescents. It's sort of a recapitulation. The saucer at Avebury, the moons, the rings, very similar to many of the others. So these, I say, are signs. They're just part of the signs that we're seeing. We're seeing other signs. One of them is circles in the sky, people seeing apparitions, people giving religious or spiritual significance to those signs. This one is out of Italy. And of course the glowing light has been associated with the Madonna as a result. Again, the circle form, the perfect form, the spiritual shape, the universal spiritual, the circle with no beginning, with no end. We also have signs of living people coming and giving us messages. People like Amma, who's been to Los Angeles many times, a living saint, a woman who is bringing divinity and is sharing that. She's sharing mother love with the world. She hugs people. I don't know, have anybody been to see Amma? It's an extraordinary experience. We've been to her ashram in India, my wife and I, and spent, it was just 10 days of bliss. Another person in Germany, no, and this one in the Dalai Lama, of course, giving a message to the world, showing how to bring peace, live with adversity through nonviolence. And then in Germany, Mother Mira, who's been very important in my wife's and my life. We always go and visit again, bringing an energy into the world, a new change. These are not just coming from one area, not just from one people. These signs of change are coming throughout the world. And I thought about this and I wanted to respond to some of this. So I thought that the way to work with human energy for me is through the chakra system, the energy system, the 7 centers in the human body. And so therefore I developed a meditational tape. Some of you that have read my book know I talk about it in there, where we, on one side of the tape, actually go through the procedure where you can go into the future and foresee or see what your future life, a future life might be like. On the other side, it's actually energy working through breathing and color and the chakras. And it's an audio tape that I have. And I just wanted to show you a little final proof of that, because I like to show demonstration. You've heard of the Aura camera, I'm sure. Many of you have probably had your Aura photographed. Well, when it first came out, I had one taken of me going out to give a lecture. And here I am, a few years ago, just about to go and give a lecture. And then I arranged with the gentleman who ran the camera to let me go and use my tape with a Walkman and do a 20-minute meditation and come back and see if there was any change, if anything was happening. Because we need to know that these signs are part of us. And we have that ability, as I said to you, to change this future. We have the ability to improve and to create with our own energies, with our own work, our future. And I just want to end with this one just to show you that was what happened. I wish I could be like that all the time, but I'm sure it's not so. But nonetheless, there is like a picture's worth 1,000 words. We have that possibility within us. All we must do is begin to unlock the keys, unlock the work. It is the inner work, in my experience, and also the outer work that have to come together until finally we begin to learn, as the Hopi would say, to walk softly on the back of the Mother, our Earth, and to begin to nourish her instead of only using her and abusing her. And so that is the thought I'd like to leave you with, and I hope you'll come back. I'm going to walk, I'll take a couple questions, and then I will walk right back there and let you have the information that I mentioned, and if you want to get a calendar or any of those things, they're all back there. Thank you very, very much.